So in this video I'm going to be discussing the important decision that Ineos have to make when appointing the next Manchester United manager, who the 4 managers are right now who I rate most highly from a tactical point of view, as well as answering the questions as to why Roberto De Zerbi would be my #1 choice for United, and what exactly makes his possession strategy not just very unique but also extremely effective. So there are good managerial appointments, Postecoglou at Tottenham, Unai Emery at Aston Villa, and then there are great appointments such as Klopp at Liverpool, Arteta at Arsenal, but there are also club-defining appointments such as Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, Pep Guardiola at Barcelona or City, and another legendary manager who I think could have a big influence over how the game changes tactically throughout the rest of the decade and into the 2030s. That man is Johan Cruyff. Now, since his passing in 2016, Cruyff's methods and principles have become even more prevalent throughout the game, with Guardiola and his disciples continuing to spread the Dutchman's influence. And with Manchester United needing to replace Erik ten Hag, in my opinion, they have a decision to make. Do they play it safe and go with a manager or a head coach, as I think I'm going to define the role from now on, who would get United back to a comfortable position in the top 4 and get into the quarterfinals of the Champions League and the odd final in the League or FA Cup? Or do they want to make a slightly riskier appointment, but an appointment that has a greater chance of not just bringing back titles to Old Trafford, but also putting United back at the top of the game in terms of innovation? And what I mean by innovation is back in 2013, when Sir Alex Ferguson retired, both Pep Guardiola and Jose Mourinho were available that summer. But before I go any further, if you want to reminisce about the Sir Alex Ferguson era, go over to Jersey FIFA. They've got all the Manchester United retro jerseys through the 90s and 2000s, as well as from other club and international sites as well. If you use code Atlantis at checkout, you'll get a discount. A link will be in my Instagram bio, which I will leave linked in the description. Now, I think Mourinho in 2013 would have been a great appointment, but appointing Guardiola could have been a club-defining appointment, as it would be for City 3 years later. And this is because whilst Guardiola and Mourinho are 2 of the greatest managers of all time, the thing that separates them is that Pep is capable of leaving his imprint on the club as a whole, soaking his principles and philosophy throughout the club structure, just as Cruyff did in the 70s and 80s as a player and as a manager at Ajax, and later on at Barcelona in the 90s. I think if Manchester United want to go down this route, which would be my preference, they need one of Motta, De Zerbi, Inzaghi or Nagelsmann. Now, why these 4? Well, to me these 4 are at the top of the tactical game in terms of who United could get. Obviously managers like Pep, Klopp, Ancelotti are also in that category, but I'm not talking about them because obviously they're not attainable for United. But in terms of who the best of the 4 is, I'd probably say that at the moment it is Inzaghi. But in terms of potential, I think Nagelsmann, Motta and particularly De Zerbi have a higher ceiling and a greater likelihood of being at the forefront of the next tactical development of the game, which I think is something that's massively overlooked in regards to who United's next manager should be. Football is always changing, and so if you're appointing a manager who doesn't think outside of the box and solely incorporates tactical ideas of the current time, when the tactical compass once again shifts, just like it has with Tuchel, Pochettino and Ten Hag from the late 2010s to the mid 2020s, there's a danger that that manager gets left behind, or at least is going to take some time to shift system or strategy. Now, I'm not saying that Inzaghi can't or won't do this, I just think he's a little bit more pragmatic, which does stifle some of his creative ideas and innovation, which is obviously a key feature for this sort of manager. I think Motta, Nagelsmann and De Zerbi are 3 of the most tactically innovative managers in world football, all with different aspects of their systems which have caught my eye. For Motta, it's his use of positional rotations, particularly the vertical movements of the centre-backs, who rather like John Stones for Pep Guardiola become a sort of libero of sorts, pushing into central midfield. However, Motta takes this a step further, with not one but both of his centre-backs having free rein to push up and move into midfield, with Motta using an incredibly fluid system where the Bologna players roam all over the pitch, rotating positions to manipulate the opposition's defensive shape and creating space whilst doing it, in a possession system reminiscent of Rinus Michels and Cruyff's total football. For Julian Nagelsmann, it's his use of advanced width to stretch the back line in possession, alongside the use of his counter press out of possession. Nagelsmann's Hoffenheim side were excellent at using advanced width to drag one of the fullbacks wider, creating space between the centre-backs and fullback for players to make underlapping runs into. Whilst at RB Leipzig, we saw Nagelsmann's effective use of a narrow pressing shape, using a 4-2-2 to counter press immediately after losing possession, before then attacking directly through the centre once a ball is won back. Now, also use of positional rotation with the centre-backs and counter-press are effective methods of creating chances. I think De Zerbi's strategy of playing through compact and organised pressing and defensive shapes allows him to solve a lot of problems that the top sides come up against, particularly Manchester United. Now, why is this? Well, I'm going to explain firstly in terms of the defensive third and build-up phase, and in another video I'll come on to the middle third. But starting with the build-up phase in the defensive third, De Zerbi likes to create what I would call a artificial counterattack. Now what does this mean? Well, we all know how effective a counterattack can be. You have more space to exploit both in the centre of the pitch to firstly progress the ball forward, and then in behind the back line to get runners into positions goal side of the opposition's defenders. But with a more limited tactical mindset, some might say, well, if you want to counterattack, that means we have to allow the opposition to control possession, and then look to win the ball back and attack directly, basically how United play under Ten Hag. However, the issue with this is firstly, as a top side, you really need to be able to control possession, as not only are you going to be able to create a higher volume of chances, but as the old saying goes, the opposition can't score if they don't have the ball. So how does Roberto De Zerbi, a coach that favours a possession dominant style, go about creating space in the centre to progress the ball forward quickly, whilst also exploiting the space in behind the back line? Well, he does this first through baiting and then playing through the opposition's press. Now usually we see sides like Manchester United wanting to get out of their box to begin the build up on the edge of their own box, effectively only using about 4/5 of the whole vertical pitch. Although the issue with this is that if the opposition's backline decide to squeeze up the pitch to halfway, which a lot of sides do in the Premier League, then this makes their defensive shape very vertically compact and reduces the space between the lines. Now this strategy is usually just to simply progress the ball from the defensive third into the opposition's half and then the final third as quickly as possible. However, if the opposition's midfield line are able to retain positions behind the ball, sitting in a narrow shape with the backline close behind, despite making it higher up the pitch, you haven't really worked the ball into a better chance creating position, particularly if the ball is just being circulated out wide and backwards. And so Roberto De Zerbi takes a different approach. Rather than trying to avoid a press and get out of the defensive third as quickly as possible, De Zerbi recognised that he could actually use the opposition's aggressive press against them. Rather than having the centre-backs starting on the edge of their own box, he instead instructs them to drop into deeper, narrower positions in order to create a back three with the keeper. This naturally will force the opposition front line to engage you higher up the pitch, stretching the pitch vertically and meaning that rather than playing with 4/5 of the pitch, you are now using that extra 1/5, which is more space that the opposition's defensive shape has to cover. De Zerbi will also instruct his fullbacks and central midfielders, which is usually a double pivot, to also retain deeper positions with the central midfielders sometimes on the edge of their own box, as this will consequently drag the opposition's midfield line high up the pitch if they do want to continue their man-to-man press. Now because the opposition doesn't want to get outnumbered at the back, even if they are using a very aggressive man-to-man press, if you are going to use a front three sitting high on the halfway line, the vast majority of the time they're going to leave at least 3 defenders back, and so this is where you can manipulate the opposition's defensive shape in order to make it easier for you to play through their press in the defensive third. We often see De Zerbi using a front 4 however, pinning the opposition's backline on the halfway line, which means when the midfield and forward line look to press you in your own box, the space between their midfield and defensive lines opens up. If you can work the ball through the press in your defensive third, which De Zerbi's sides are very good at doing with their short and quick passing, once you progress the ball into the middle third, this is where your attack on first glance appears to be a counter-attack, because the opposition's front and midfield line are caught high up the pitch, and there is a massive amount of space in behind the back line for you then to exploit. But De Zerbi takes his even further by using a front 2 who drop off from the forward line into the space behind the midfield, which causes the centre-backs a problem. Naturally, the centre-backs in a man-to-man pressing system are going to instinctively want to follow their forward deep. However, if both centre-backs do this, this vacates a massive amount of space in the centre of the back line, from where De Zerbi's wide forwards can then look to make diagonal runs into these positions, looking to receive a long pass or a through ball to release them on goal. However, if even just one of the centre-backs decides not to follow the movement deep and retain a deeper position in the back line, this now gives De Zerbi's side a spare man in the space behind the midfield, meaning that if they can work the ball through or over the press into this player, they can now turn and drive the attack forward, with the centre-back not being tight on them to stop them being able to do this. And so De Zerbi has created a system that positionally goes against a lot of the mainstream possession strategy and the Cruyffian school of thought, looking to create space in front of the opposition's backline by baiting the front and midfield lines into pressing aggressively, and then using strategic positioning at the top of the pitch in order to positionally pin defenders, putting them in awkward positions where whatever decision they opt for is going to open up an opportunity for De Zerbi's side to exploit. Now we'll go more into De Zerbi's possession and pressing systems in future videos, but I just wanted to give you a brief analysis of why I rate De Zerbi so highly. If you want some more analysis, I'll leave some links in the description below. If you want some exclusive videos and my Patreon podcast, you can sign up to the Patreon and get a 7-day free trial. But let me know what you think of De Zerbi in the comment section below, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you do get notified when my videos come out.